Okay, so this will be the final video in the series for the rotating base assembly. On this video, we're going to focus on taking all the parts and putting them actually together into the assembly. We're going to also introduce some things with component patterning, and then from there, we'll go through the exploded view and finish up with the drawing. So again, off your home page, we're going to go locate our assemblies folder, looking specifically for the rotating base folder, which should be the last folder in there. If I click in the rotating base folder, I am now looking for the rotating base assembly PDF file. Left click so it comes on. Now, as you can see, this is way too small for me. So again, I'm going to go ahead and download this so I can open it with Adobe Acrobat and say OK. Now this is what we're looking at. Looks complex, but it's not overly that difficult. We just got to make sure we understand. We're going to have to bring some stuff from our toolbox, pattern our features around here, and then how to do a proper explode. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to start in with the base piece first. So as I start my assembly, I'm going to turn on my origin, bring this base in here, and then what I'll do is I'm going to bring in basically one piece at a time. I'm bringing in one ball bearing, and I'm going to show you how to pattern it 20 times. Okay, so with that said, let's go into SOLIDWORKS. Start new, but now again, we don't have a template here. So I'm going to go to my tutorial tab, hit the word assemb and say OK. I'm going to go ahead and close this window out for right now, but what I want to do is up here where this eye is located, I'm going to drop down the menu here, and I'm going to look for origins. So view origins, left click. And now what I want to do is I want to actually browse for this base piece, which is this part right here. I'm going to go ahead and say open. Put my cursor right on that origin and left click. Now from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn my origins off. Come back down to that eyeball and left click. Now from here, what I want to do is bring in the ball bearing. I'm going to do this in simple steps because I want to show you the patterning before I bring everything else in. So what I'm going to do is go to my assembly tab and insert components. I am now going to bring in one ball bearing, say open, and place it here. Okay, now let's go look at this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place one ball bearing, basically it's going to sit in this hole, okay, anywhere in here. And there's really no specific spot it has to sit. It just needs to sit in the channel. So wherever you put it, it's okay. We're just going to pattern it 20 times. Because you got to remember, ball bearings are meant to spin. Okay, so it's not really critical that you have them exactly at the 12 o'clock position or the 1 o'clock position. Just get it in there so that it fits in the channel, and then we'll go ahead and pattern from there. So what I'm going to do is go back into SOLIDWORKS here. I'm going to now add my mate tool. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the ball here, and I'm going to take this edge right here. Now it's going to give me tangent. Now it's to the outside, which is not really good. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to take the mate alignment and flip it to the inside so it sits in the middle and hit my check mark. Now the big thing is it's still kind of floating out here in space. So I need to hit this one more time and this bottom face. So this is sitting flush with that face and tangent to these two walls. Now at this point, check mark, close your mate tool, and now this is what you're looking at. Okay, so I have one in there, and it doesn't matter where it is. If you have it over here, it doesn't matter. It's okay if you have it at the 12 o'clock, you can rotate it to the side. Once you have this here, what we're going to do is we are going to do a component pattern. Now to do this, okay, we have to go in here, excuse me, and we have to turn on our temporary axes again. So I'm going to drop this down and hit these two axis symbols because we have to do a spin here. So where it says linear component pattern, we are actually going to drop this to a circular component pattern. And what that wants to know is where do you want to rotate this around? So I'm going to click inside this box and pick this axis in the middle. Now I want these equally spaced, and I want 20 of these pieces. And then the components I want to pattern is that ball right there. So all I did was left click on it. And now you'll notice there are 20 ball bearings going in a circle all the way around this piece. Hit your check mark. I'm going to go ahead now at this point. I'm going to turn off my temporary axes so you can get a better look at this. So there you go. There are your bearings. And if you start to rotate, you can actually see they'd rotate together. Okay, so it doesn't matter where you started. All of them are in the same place. Okay, so now we've got that main step right there. So let's go back and look at what we have to bring in next. So I've got these in place. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my mid plate. Okay, so I'm going to go back into SOLIDWORKS. I'm going to insert another component. I'm going to bring in my mid plate and say open. Okay, so a couple things here. I'm going to go ahead and start with a mate. It doesn't matter which way you go. I'm going to take the inside of this hole and the inside of that one and make them concentric. So they're going to share the same center. So everything's lined up. I'm going to hit my check mark. Okay, now I'm going to move this up. Now really, the only thing left for me to do is that if you look here, this channel, the bottom edge of that channel right there, okay, is going to sit flush on top of these ball bearings. Okay, and really you could have probably got away with this surface touching that surface, but I want to make sure my ball bearings are compressed in there. Okay, it's really important that you have those in there. So now my ball bearings are sealed. If I hit my check mark, here's what I'm looking at, and this should be able to spin freely. Okay, that's good. So now from my isometric view, I'm going to look and see what else I need to bring in. So looking in here, it looks like I need to bring another set of ball bearings in here. And those ball bearings are going to sit right on this lip right here, and they can be compressed by the top plate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to grab another ball bearing. So I'm going to do again a single one, but this time I will pattern it 24 times. So going back into SOLIDWORKS, insert component, I'm going to bring in a ball bearing again and open. And what I'm going to do is just place it out here in space. Okay, turn on my mate tool, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the ball bearing here and I'm going to mate it to the side of this piece right here. Okay, so there it is, right to the side. Now you can see it's too low, but we'll get that in the second mate here. It's going to be a tangent mate. I'm going to go ahead and check mark. And now I'm going to hit my ball bearing one more time, but this time I'm going to hit the bottom flat face right here, this edge or lip, so that the ball bearing is sitting right on top of it, like so. I'm going to hit my check mark. Now, from here, close your mate tool. What I need to do is again go to the eye, turn on my temporary axes so that I can have a pattern that I can work around, or an axis to do my pattern. So again, under assembly, I'm going to go to linear component pattern, drop it to circular component pattern. In the first box, I'm going to take the vertical line right here in the middle. I want 24 of these equally spaced. And the component I want you to pattern is this ball bearing. So I have 24 of them now. And check mark. Now I'm going to go ahead again, come up here and turn off my axes. Spacebar isometric, and now this is what I'm looking at. Now again, these are all able to spin, so is this wheel. So now at this point, looking at the drawing, I need to bring in a top plate to compress those in. Actually, what I also need to do is I need to bring in my spacers. So actually I'm going to bring the spacers in next, and then we'll compress that down with a top plate. So going back into SOLIDWORKS, let's go ahead and do another insert components, but I'm again pattern this one. So I'm only going to bring in one piece and say open. Drop it out in space. Now again, I'm going to focus on one hole. I'm going to go to my mate tool, and I'm going to take the inside of my spacer to the inside of one of the holes and hit my check mark. I'm then going to take the bottom of the spacer, and I'll move this out, and make it flush with that metal face right there. And check. So I have only one spacer there. Okay, now I'm going to get out my mate tool, and again, just like we did with the ball bearings, come in here and turn on my temporary axis. Under linear component, drop it to circular component pattern. I want to pick the middle line right here as my spin point. I would like 6 of these spacers equally spaced, and the components to pattern will be this right here. And if I've done it correctly, they should be perfectly aligned on the holes. I hit my check mark, and now that is done. Since I'm done with my patterning, I will again take off my temporary axes. Okay, now I have my spacers in there and all of my ball bearings. Now I need to seal this down with a top plate. So I'm going to go in here and do an insert components, and I'm going to bring in my top plate and say open. Now this is going to kind of be out here in space. Now I'm going to start by getting this kind of concentrically mated with the piece below. Okay, and I can do this a couple different ways. I'm just going to do the outside edges in this case. The outside edges will be concentric, which makes it really easy. Okay, I'm going to hit my check mark. Now I need to move this up because that's not quite right. All right. The next thing I need to do is I need to kind of lock this in place because these holes must line up with the inside of our, oh no. It looks like I have to go back and fix my spacers. So now I need to go back and adjust those. I'm going to pause right here for a second. Okay, so as you can see, I think I've got the spacer figured out. For some reason, they were tilted in, not sure why, but I think that may have been optical illusion on my part because now they're set in their places. Everything looks good. I've got this in alignment, at least from the outside edge. So now what I'm going to do here is I need to still mate these holes to the inside of that spacer. Okay, because I need to make sure this thing doesn't spin. So it's got to lock right to those holes so that my screws line up. Now, the last part is I don't want to necessarily squeeze down to this face right here between these two. I'm going to actually take this channel right there and mate it to the top of these ball bearings. So there may be a small space right there because we don't want to compress those bearings so they don't spin. We need to keep them loose enough that when the part is all assembled, this whole thing can spin together. Okay, so right now, this is still able to spin inside. Okay, so that's the key thing. This whole thing would be able to spin. If we compress it too tight and push down on the bearing, this thing would be wedged in and would never be able to move. Okay, so with that said, this part is almost done. Okay, so I've got my top plate on. So now my ball bearings are locked in here and they're locked in underneath here. Okay, so now the last step here is really to add our screws and our nuts. Okay, now the screws we're using today, if you look at this bill of materials, we are using B18.35M. These are M4 by 0.7 by 25 millimeter socket flat, basically flathead machine screws. Okay, FCHS. The socket cap screws are a little bit different. It's just basically a countersunk screw. So we're going to have to go to our toolbox here and go find one of these. Okay, so I'm going to go over here to my toolbox, which is over here under the design library. That's the books. I'm going to hit the word toolbox. If it asks you to add it in, say yes. We're using ANSI metric because we got to match our units together. So double click metric, bolts and screws. We're going to go countersunk. Actually not there. We're going to go to socket head screws, sorry. And we're going to do a socket head countersunk right here, which is the B18.3.5M. It's going to be the second one under our socket head screws. Now what you're going to do is left click and drag it out here. Okay, now usually it's going to give it pretty small. Right now it's at an M3. According to the bill of materials, it should be an M4. It should have a length of 25 millimeters. I'm going to go ahead and put a cosmetic thread on it so it looks like a real screw. And once I have one, I'm going to hit my check mark. And then I'm going to go ahead and close this out. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert one screw and one bolt. And then I'm going to pattern them with a component pattern so I don't have to do a whole bunch of mates. So I'm going to turn on my mate tool, line up that hole right, or that screw thread right there into this hole right there. Now it's upside down for me, so I'm going to go to my mate alignment and flip it over. Okay, that's what allows you to do. You can flip these over. I'm going to hit my check mark, and then I'm going to go ahead and hit this top right here, that top surface there, and check. Now don't panic, this looks a little bit small. It's okay. It's what it should look like. You are good to go. Okay, so now, check mark. So what I want to do is I'm actually going to rotate over. I need to bring a bolt to lock this screw into place. So going back into my bill of materials, I need to bring in a double chamfer hex nut bolt. Okay, it's going to be an M4. So going back into SOLIDWORKS, I will go back to my toolbox. I'm going to go back into my ANSI metric. We're going to pick a nut, hex nuts. We're looking for a double chamfer, basically any hex nut. Okay, so I think we're just going to go, I'm not sure if it had a number on it. We'll just go with any one of these. I think I'm just going to go with hex nut style 1, B18.2.4. Drag that out here, because it really doesn't tell me which one it is. Okay, I'm just going to double chamfer hex nut. So what I want to do is make sure it's double chamfer. The size will be an M4. Threads will be cosmetic. And I think I'll just leave it just like that and hit my check mark. I'm going to hit escape because I only need one of these. And then I'm going to take this one. I just want to verify these are the right ones. Yep, that looks about the same. Yep, looks good. I'm going to take my mate tool inside that hole there to here. Check. And then I want that flat face of my bolt or nut to be with this surface right here, and check. So now if you're looking at it, there you go. I've got that bolted into place. Okay, looking up here, same thing. Okay, got the bolt into place. Now, from here, all I want to do is pattern this. So I'm going to get out of my mate tool. Okay, close this down just a little bit. I am now going to go to and turn on my axes. I'm going to go to linear component pattern and do circular. In the first box here, I'm going to pick this vertical line. I need 6 of these to pattern. And the components I want to pattern is this screw, and rotate over, and that nut. And just like that, your screws and nuts are all in place. I'm going to go ahead back to the eye and turn off my temporary axes. And at this point, your part is done. So now what I want to do is I'm going to quickly do a file save as. We're going to call this final rotating base assembly and say save. Okay, we're going to pull up the mass properties on this. I'm going to go to evaluate. This is the one I want you to print. I got a total mass of 974.44. So I'm going to hit print because this is the one I want to put to the back of the paper. I'm going to say OK. So now at this point, you can see we can actually go ahead and do our exploded view next. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and pull this thing apart. Now, I'm going to do it in a logical order. The first thing I'll probably end up doing is I'll go ahead and pull the bolts off. Then I'm going to pull the screws all up. Then my top plate, then my spacers, the ball bearings, the mid plate, and then the last ball bearings. Okay. Now, as I do this, watch carefully how I pull, pull these parts apart. So I'm going to go to my exploded view. So assembly, exploded view. I'm going to come to the bottom of this. I'm going to highlight all 6 of these bolts, or these nuts. Now to help me see this, I'm going to go to an isometric view. And now all I'm going to do is pull this down so I can see the majority of those nuts right there. Hit done to the left. I'm going to hit these 6 screws. I'm going to pull these pretty considerably up and then hit done. I may have to come back and adjust each step when I'm done. All right. Anyway, next, I'm going to hit the top plate. I'm going to pull the top plate up to right below the screws. Hit done. Now, I'm going to hit the spacers next. All 6 of them. And pull those straight up. And say done. Now, this is the hard part. Now, if you want to highlight all these at one time, you could go and find the pattern. So I'm going to left click this pattern. Oh, it may not let me do it. Never mind. I thought you could do the pattern here, but you can't. But you can hit this right here if you expand it out. And if you use your shift key and come down here and highlight all these at one time, that'd be a lot easier than clicking 24 times. I am now going to pull these straight up below like so and hit done. Okay, compress that back down. All right, I'm going to hit this mid plate right here and slide it up. Now it looks like I'm going to have to go back and do a little bit of adjusting here. So I'm going to say done here. I'm going to go back up into here and take the second step here. I'm going to raise these up a little bit more. Okay, third step, I'm going to raise this up a little bit more. Fourth step, I think I'm going to raise these up a little bit higher. Fifth step, I'm going to raise these up a little bit higher. Okay, and then sliding down, I'm going to hit the sixth step, raise this up a little bit higher. Oh, nope. Control Z that. Pull the arrow straight up. I'm not sure what's going on there. Okay, pull that up a little bit. Okay, hit done. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit the last local pattern, which was, I believe, this one here. I'm going to expand that out and highlight the first one, shift key, and highlight all 20 at once. And then I'm just going to pull the up arrow. And I'm actually going to undo that step. Why? Because I forgot one more. Some reason this one did not get picked. Okay, so there. Now all 20 have been selected. Slide those up and hit your check mark, F key. Okay, that's not too bad. All right, so now what I want to do is hit save. So at this point, what I want to work on is I want to work on getting my drawing done. Okay, so this is just basically bringing in an isometric current model view and an isometric exploded view and bringing all the other pieces together. Okay, then we'll talk about how to do these two balloons, and then that way you can turn this in and be done with it. So at this point, I'm going to go to File New, SolidWorks Templates, GHSA Metric, OK. I'm going to start with my final rotating base. I'm going to go ahead and bring in isometric. I'll bring in the exploded view first. I'm going to go ahead and leave that. Now, if you've got a bunch of these, because some of you have a tendency to hit too many exploded views, you'll have to drop this down and figure which one is the correct one. I'm going to turn on my color. The scale for this today is going to be, I think I said 1 to 2. Hopefully this will fit, 1 to 2. And there is my isometric view. Done. Okay, at this point, I'm going to slide that up a little bit. Get rid of that box right there. Okay, take my metric, move it to the lower corner. And now I'm going to go to my View Layout tab again. Model View. Double click Rotating Base, but this time I want to make no exploded view. So take this box and uncheck it. Turn on your color. Again, scale will be at 1 to 2. Custom scale. I'm going to slide this one right up in here to the top. I'm then going to go ahead to Model View, double click Rotate, oops, not yet. I'm actually going to Control Tab and go back into my assembly. Okay, and at this point, I'm going to go ahead and right click here and say Collapse. Okay, so now it's back to a collapsed state. I'm going to use my arrow key and tab up 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I'm going to go back to my drawing, Model View, double click, isometric, in color, scale at 1 to 2. Oh, excuse me, current model view. Got to remember current model view. Sorry, current model view. And drop that right below. Drag a window and delete all your extra black lines. So at this point, I have all my views in. So the first thing I'm going to do is highlight this face right here, or this note right here, and do a control copy, control C. Come back to my drawing, take my annotation and note tool, and drop this right below, control V. Highlight this top line, make sure it's bold and underlined, and then I want you to double click and type in the mass of the mass property sheet you printed. As soon as you've done that, click outside and hit escape. Okay, so those views are done. I'm going to go ahead at this point, I'm going to slide this one up a little bit higher here. Bring this one up a little bit higher with it. Looks good there. And now what I'm going to do is go ahead and insert my bill of materials. So tables, bill of materials. I'm going to take the bill of materials from this left-hand side and hit my green check mark. But I'm going to bring it towards the right. Now I'm going to go ahead and clean this up real quick. I'm going to come in here and double click. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all the names, my last names. That way I can kind of make some of these columns a little bit smaller, some of these rows a little bit smaller. Come on. Okay, double click. Keep that one as it is. Keep that one as it is. Okay. Now, I'm just going to go ahead, bring this in a little bit tighter. And now I'm going to start typing in my descriptions. Okay, so I'm going to actually slide this over to my other window so I can see these descriptions as I type. I'm going to start with the base. I'm going to type in AISI 304 steel. Okay, my bearing. Okay, I'm actually going to call in here and call it ball bearing. Okay, so I'm clicking the double clicking the ball bearing. I'm going to change that there to AISI type 316L stainless steel. Mid plate, excuse me, is going to be a chrome stainless steel. Spacer is going to be a 1350 aluminum alloy. Top plate is going to be an AISI 304 stainless steel, or steel, AISI 304 steel. We're just going to put a note for and say yes here. And we're going to put socket, flathead, machine, screw. Double click this one. Yes. Double chamfer, hex nut. Now from here, I'm just going to kind of start shrinking up some of these lines a little bit, just tightening things up. Give myself a little bit more working room. Take this column here and shrink it up as much as I can. Take my quantity and shrink it a little bit tighter. Okay, and at this point, I will leave this. Oh, and this one here, this hex nut, I'm actually going to override this one and say yes, because this one we want to change it to AM, and I know we didn't pick this one necessarily, M4-C, but we're going to go with it anyways, just because that's what they have in there. Okay, and at this time, what I'm going to do is just kind of move this into place underneath. That's pretty good right there. All right, and that is now done. Okay, so this part of the drawing is complete. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the note underneath the exploded view, Control C, add a note here and drop it underneath with a Control V. Okay, hit escape. Now again, I want to make sure this one here is underlined, bold, and underlined. Okay, Just trying to think of other ways I can shrink this down. I think that looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit smaller, but I don't want to go too much. Bring the quantity in a little bit tighter. Bring this in. And slide this over a little bit more. I think that'll give me a little bit more space. Sorry, I'm mumbling to myself. Okay, drop this down a little bit. So now let's put on our balloons. Okay, so here we go. Turn on my balloon. I'm going to come in here and pick on one of the screws. I would like these not to be tight fit. I want them all at 2 characters. So I'm just going to start clicking on each of the pieces and add my balloons as I go. Okay, you don't have to put a bunch of arrows on this because there's so many, it would make it very, very hard to see. Now this one I'm going to come back and edit in a moment. Okay, so be aware I will get this one edited in a little bit. This ball bearing here. Okay, this right here. And finish off with a hex nut here. Okay, now I'm going to go back to this ball bearing right here. I'm going to say circular. Instead of circular, I'm going to go to a circular split line. And on the bottom one, I'm going to add a text. Okay, so there's going to be item number and text. And what I'm going to put in the text is a big capital X 24. And check. I'm going to go to this number 2. Circular split line. Bottom number will be text. That's going to be an X20. And check. Okay, so just adjust these as you need to so they look nice. And at this point, this drawing is now done, except for the title block. So what I'm going to do here is go 1 of 3. Your first initial last name. Title is going to be Final Rotating Base Assembly. Go ahead and make an adjustment so it's centered up. Scale will be 1 to 2. Period is whatever class you're currently in. Don't forget the date. As soon as you have this done, do a file save as. Final rotating base assembly and save. And then I want you to go ahead and print this, staple your mass properties to the back of it, and submit this in the collection box. This drawing is due at the end of class. With that said, the rotating base is now done. This is the last video. Use this video to your advantage. Go ahead and pause, rewind, watch as many times as you need to. But either way, the big thing I want you to take out of this is how to do circular components. We'll actually do this the next several assemblies, so you'll get good at these patternings. Otherwise, good luck. Remember, this is due at the end of the period.